This is the Red Line Network.
Guten Tag, or good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are across this country or around the globe. Welcome to another edition of Student Body Right, all things college football. I'm your host, Ryan Neff, here on the Red Line Radio Network. The Big Ten having their media days this week. Go figure, they're having it late. They couldn't have had it earlier in the month, but they're having it the next couple of days. On the program, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. Mr. JAMEY VINNICK, award-winning Palouse Bureau Chief for the @KookFan.com, at WSU Pullman alum, Viva the Underdogs, at Jamie Vinnick 9 on the Twitter. That would be Mr. Jamie Vinnick covering Washington State football. The revamped Pac-10, Pac-12, Pac-14, whatever you want to call it now. Pac-8, Pac-9, doesn't matter. It's good to see that conference is going to retool and come back strong. But Jamie Vinnick will be in here to talk about Washington State Cougars football. I'm going to have to go back and take a look. They got crushed in 2 games last year. I believe it was Washington, and I think it was San Diego State maybe, that they got their ass kicked. But then the rest of the season, let me go to it here. Guess I had to go back and take a look. Week number 1, they beat Idaho last year, 13-10. Scrappy game. Week number 2, they beat San Diego State 36-13. Then week 3, they got crushed by then number 24 North Texas last year. Then week 4, they got their ass kicked by Washington 59-24. Week 5, they beat Colorado State 20-3. Then they had a bye week 7. Played Ole Miss tough. Had a chance to beat them. They only lost 24-21. Then the following week, another crusher against Virginia. They lost 22-20. Then they come back, beat Toledo. Only lost to Oregon State by 3. Beat Louisiana Tech 28-3 in week 12. Week 13, they only lost to James Madison by 4. Then week 14, they hammered Oregon State. Yes, they played twice. And in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, handily beat Utah State 34-20 when they finished 7-6 last year. But you look at the James Madison game, the first Oregon State game, the Virginia game, and the Ole Miss game. Had they won 3 of those, they could have easily been 10-3 last year, 9-4. The problem with Oregon State last year was their defense was horrendous. I'm sorry, their offense was horrendous. The defense played top notch, except for those, you get your ass kicked by Washington, and you also get your, Washington and North Texas. But the offense couldn't do shit those games. So, like I said, Big Ten media days this week. The Big Ten commissioner, Mr. Petiti, said today in Chicago about the Big Ten's dominance over the SEC now. Let's see. Maybe just recently, but not over the last 20 years. Tony Petitti made it clear to the attendees of the Big Ten Media Days that his league has emerged as a class of college football with its postseason dominance in the 12-team playoff era. The Big Ten has won 4 college football playoff games in a row directly against the SEC, which hasn't had a team play for the conference title in the past 3 years. The Big Ten has 11 wins by 7 different teams the past 2 years in the 12-team college football playoff era, outpacing the 5 wins of the SEC. He said today more than double the next best league, throwing some shade. Illinois coach Brett Bielema said at Big Ten Media Days, he said, the SEC, they want to live in 2005 forever, whatever that means. Bielema later smiled and said, I think I just made the headline, huh? Sweet. What else did Mr. Petitti say? This idea that the middle of our conference isn't hard is just not right. At the end of the day, our teams are ready for the college football playoff. Our travel looks like the college football playoff travel. You're going all over the country. How we play, the difficulty on the road in the Big Ten, I just think that's overlooked. The reason why we've been so successful is our teams are prepared. When the best teams in any given season play each other, that's great. That prepares them, but you also get through a lot of really difficult games. Not to mention NIL and the transfer portal. That's where the Big Ten, I believe, has made up the most ground. What else did Petitti say? I think the first place you go is with our colleagues in the other conferences, SEC, ACC, Big 12, Pac 12, also a defendant, and the NCAA, he said. He was talking about the potential of the Protect College Sports Act not passing. How do we come together to make the necessary changes to the way the settlement is operating so we can let our athletic so we can give our athletic directors, our coaches, our student athletes a system that seems to be more sustainable and more predictable. So he's throwing shade at the SEC. We'll find out this year. We'll find out early. Texas, Ohio State in Austin. Notre Dame has passed Ohio State for the richest patch deal. Patches. Was an old Clarence Carter song. Reported by Mark Schlabel at ESPN, Notre Dame has reached a multi-year deal with SoFi Technologies that will place the financial service company's brand on the Fighting Irish's jerseys in every sport starting this season, the university announced today. The 6-year deal is worth about 18 mil to 20 mil per year, according to industry sources, and it's believed to be the richest in college athletics history. It is the very first time a corporate logo will appear as a patch on Notre Dame's jerseys. According to a news release, SoFi will establish a new annual $1.4 million fund to support Notre Dame's For Forever campaign, which funds scholarships in 26 sports and supports student athletes through financial education, career development, and other opportunities. Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bavacqua said in a statement today, our For Forever promise at Notre Dame is paramount to providing the best student athlete experience in the country. SoFi shares in this commitment to developing strong, ambitious leaders who are set up for success at Notre Dame and beyond. Together, our relationship will create lasting value as our student athletes and their families for generations to come. Blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. It's just about more money. That topped Ohio State's deal, by the way. that they have made with JP Morgan Chase for a lucrative jersey patch deal. It includes jersey patches for all 36 of the Buckeyes teams and will yield nearly $17 million per year. It is believed to be, other than Notre Dame, one of the biggest non-apparel corporate deals in college sports. Ohio Athletic Director Ross Bjork said, JP Morgan Chase is a global brand with deep roots in Ohio, making them a natural partner that shares our commitment to innovation, excellence, and long-term community impact. And $17 million, by the way. Together, we have built a comprehensive and historic partnership that reflects the strong commercial strength of the Ohio State athletics identity and the broader college athletics landscape. This relationship creates meaningful opportunities for our student athletes that support the sustained excellence and competitiveness of our athletic programs while honoring the tradition and values of Ohio State. This keeps getting better. I don't want to hear about striving for excellence and all this other bullshit. It's about the dead presidents, man. That's all it's about. It's about the dead presidents. All this other spin doctoring, rhetoric bullshit is just a way to make it sound really good, like they care about the other stuff. They don't. Papiondo, reported by the Associated Press, steps down as Kentucky football general manager just 7 months into that particular position. Remember, he followed Will Stein from Oregon over to Kentucky. He said, "This is a personal move, and I hope everyone will respect the private nature of such a tough decision." He thanked Kentucky and Stein for the opportunity. Kentucky Athletics issued a statement saying that Biondo informed officials of his decision to step down. Kentucky Athletics Department said, "We respect his choice and the personal considerations behind it. We are grateful for his contributions to our program." Something is afoot there. Some of the other stuff I've already been through. But if you care about shit like this, Heather Dinich, ESPN, she's still sticking with Texas as a preseason #1. She thinks Texas has something to say this year. I still need to see it on the football field. This reported by Dan Murphy, ESPN. The Stanford football players join push for collective bargaining. Stanford football players have formed a campus chapter of the College Football Players Association, making the Cardinal the first team to partner with the organization, which aims to eventually unionize college athletes, which would make them employees. Players are not yet petitioning to form a union or be deemed employees, but their announcement Monday marks a first step toward building a structure for college athletes to collectively bargain like professional athletes, a once verboten idea that has gained popularity in recent years as high-level college sports become more personalized. I never thought I would see the day when shit like this would take place in college football. I would encourage you to go read the article. It's a lot of gobbledygook jargon. This is just another way for the Power Four conferences to leave the little guys behind. Bill Connolly from ESPN came out with his 2026 Big Ten college football preview predictions. I don't do any of this stuff because it doesn't matter. He is projecting Ohio State's. Let me go down the list here. He has Ohio State as the favorite, followed by Oregon. It's the same players in the Big Ten, by the way. In Indiana, of course, got to throw them in there. Those are his three main contenders for the Big Ten championship. Then he has in his second tier USC. Give me a break. Lincoln Riley's been there how long now? I'm not seeing it. Just don't see it. I could be wrong, but I have to see it. Michigan with Kyle Whittingham there. Is Kyle Whittingham going to make that program great? Probably. But he's going to find it much tougher in the Big Ten on a consistent basis. And he has Penn State with Matt Campbell there. So, I mean, Whittingham in his first year, Campbell at Penn State in his second year. We'll see. We'll see what he can do in his first year. I'm not expecting a whole lot. He also has the Washington Huskies in there. And Iowa. Again, I will say this about Iowa. They can get good quarterback play. But the way the defense has been the last 4 or 5 years. I know Tom Kakert was on here last month, and he said he was concerned about the defense this year. But we'll see. The Illini, maybe a sneaky pick. Nebraska, again, not seeing it. Still need to see it. And he has Minnesota. Again, they're good for 6, 7 wins a year. Every maybe 4th or 5th year, they win 8 or 9 games. UCLA, Chesney in his first year there. Not expecting much out of UCLA. Maryland, I'm still surprised Mike Loxley is there. I don't think they're going to do anything. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell. This is his 4th year there. If it goes south really early, I think Luke Fickell will be out of a job. And of course, Northwestern. David Braun in his 4th year there. See what they can do. And he has Rutgers. These are the teams that he has maybe going 6-6. What can Greg Schiano do in his 18th season? Michigan State, a lot of first-year coaches in the Big Ten. Pat Fitzgerald. I didn't like the hire of Fitzgerald, but we'll see what he can do at Michigan State. Had a lot of success at Northwestern with the whole hazing thing, which was a black eye. I don't expect much out of Michigan State. Purdue, god awful. He has down here many big anniversaries in the Big Ten. 90 years ago, in 1936, Minnesota went on to claim its 3rd national title in a row. Most people don't know that. Despite losing to a Northwestern team that won the conference. 1956, 70 years ago. Forrest Ivashevsky's Iowa Hawkeyes finished the program best 3rd in the AP Bowl with a 9-1 campaign and a 35-19 thumping of Oregon State in the Rose Bowl. (1966), 60 years ago this year. An all-time great Michigan State team hosted Notre Dame for a year-ending #1 versus #2 game of the century battle, and came away with one of the most frustrating ties in the history of the sport. I believe Michigan State won the title that year. 40 years ago. God, I can't believe this is 40 years ago. It's amazing. 1986, Penn State went on to win the national title for the second time when they beat Miami. Vinny Testaverde threw 4 interceptions that game. 20 years ago, can't believe this is 20 years ago. I remember it distinctly. Michigan and Ohio State played in the biggest game in the history of the rivalry, perhaps. They were both 11-0 that year, and the Buckeyes won on the road 42-39. Troy Smith went on to win the Heisman that year. He had 4 touchdowns against Michigan. And then 10 years ago, Michigan and Ohio State played that year. Ohio State won that in double overtime, 30-27. And there, the Buckeyes were down 10. And a big win for Ohio State in that series. So again, like some of these are food for fodder. I was just looking up some other stuff here. I will, and I'll say it. Some of them come up with their updated top 25s and stuff like that. Let's see if anybody's updated them. ESPN came out with their power index for 2026. I will go down the top, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 4, 6. I'll go over the top 11. We have Texas Tech at 11, LSU 10th, Alabama 9th, Miami 8th, Indiana 7th, Georgia 6th. Georgia 5th, Oregon 4th, Notre Dame 3rd, Texas 2nd, and Ohio State 1st. Projected win-loss totals. You can bet this at your own leisure. They've got Texas Tech going probably 10-1 or 10-2, somewhere in there. Notre Dame, same thing, 11-1-ish. Miami 10-2. They actually have Texas Tech going about 11-1. Ohio State 10-2. Ducks 10-2. The Hoosiers 10-2. Should be interesting. Georgia 9-3. And a partridge in a pear tree. The win out percentage, basically going undefeated. They've got Notre Dame is at 32% to win all their games. Texas Tech 25%. And then the next closest is Georgia at 10%. And then it drops off exponentially. Indiana at 9%. Ohio State at 9%. Miami at 8%. Oregon at 8%. Six wins. Again, if you're a betting man. There's a high percentage of a lot of teams winning 6 games. Looks like 3/4 of the teams they have winning 6 games. Playoff percentages. ESPN Power Index. They have Ohio State a 75% chance to make the playoffs. Notre Dame, they have 74% chance of making the playoffs. Texas, a 70% chance. Oregon, a 64% chance. Georgia and Miami, about a 64% chance. Texas Tech, a 57% chance. Indiana, a 57% chance. So those 8 teams almost penciled in. Then they have Alabama at 41%, and then it drops off into the 30s with LSU and Texas A&M. So they have the power index there. Again, I don't make any of my predictions until my college football playoff preview special. Then I'm not going to rank them. I'm not going to put them in any seeds. I'm just going to pick the teams that I think are going to make the college football playoff, because to try and see them in August when they're not going to take place until December, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pick the 12 teams who I think are going to make the college football playoff and be done with it. Or who I think are the 12 best teams that I think should make the college football playoff, instead of all that other rigmarole. But I believe the Big Ten Media Days run through either tomorrow or Thursday, I believe. Again, I was looking over, or trying to look over, updated. Let's see if it'll show me here. Some updated college football playoff rankings, if anybody has done that yet. Nope, On3 hasn't updated theirs yet. I don't see Yahoo updating theirs yet. Again, it's just food for fodder. If you want me to go to the On3 rankings, who they have, this was as of July 20th, last week. Their top 25. If the power goes out, I apologize, because this is supposed to storm here in the Northeast. Got a line of thunderstorms blowing through. So On3 preseason top 25, they have SMU 25th, Ole Miss 24th, Iowa 23rd, Washington 22nd, Auburn 21st, Nebraska 20th, BYU 19th, Florida State 18th, Indiana they have all the way down at 17, Tennessee 16th, Texas A&M 15th, Florida 14th for my Gators, who I think is just way too high, Clemson 13th, Penn State 12th, Oregon 11th. They have USC 10th, way too high, Miami 9th, Oklahoma 8th, Michigan 7th, LSU 6th, Texas they have it 5. Notre Dame 4, Georgia 3rd, Alabama 2nd, way too high, and Ohio State. Really, they should revamp that. Some of these picks are abysmal. They've come up with their SEC football. Athlon Sports ranks all 16 teams by tiers ahead of the 2026 season. So this is according to Athlon Sports, who their top 16 in the SEC are. Tier 1, they have National Conference Championship favorites, Georgia and Texas. Tier 2, these are their college football playoff contenders in 2026. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Tennessee. Tier 3, he has his wild card teams who could do a little damage or push for a college football playoff. The Gators. You have the Gators ranked 14th, but you have them as a wild card push. South Carolina, Missouri, Auburn. Beach Bowl eligibility with 6 wins. You have Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, and Tier 5. A few breaks for the postseason. They have Kentucky and Arkansas. Which may have not so great seasons. And again, if I look at the SEC, I think it's wide open. I really do. People can come out with their tiers and shit, who they think is going to make the SEC champions or whatever they do. Now, I don't know. But again, on 3, according to Athlon, their National Conference Championship favorites are Georgia, Texas. Still have to see it out of Texas a little bit, and I still have to see it out of Georgia a little bit for me to even go there. Arch played well the second half of the season last year. Georgia, how do they respond off of last year? We'll see. But I see him in the green room. I told you all everything about on his X account. I don't need to do that. But before I bring him on, I need to bring him on properly. Covering Washington State. Again, they finished 7-6 last year with Poland or Utah State, but out of winning the game, they could have won. It could have been maybe 9-4 last year, or even 10-3. The ball would have bounced a certain way. But let's bring him on. That's Mr. Jamey Vinnick. Jamey, thanks for joining.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yes, sir. So let's get into it from last year. I had to look 7-6, nothing to sneeze at up there in Pullman, plus a bowl win. And when you look at the schedule, other than Washington hammering them and North Texas hammering them, they could have beaten Ole Miss. They could have beaten some of the other teams. That first Oregon State game, that was a toss-up. They could have won that one. But I had to go back and take a look at the stats from last year. Defensively, they were stout. Offensively, it was a little bit different story. So how do they address that in the offseason?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the coaching change right away, it almost addressed the offense within itself. I mean, it just, the offense that Jimmy Rogers wanted to run was a very kind of, mundane, vanilla offense. And I think at first it was the belief that it was all on the shoulders of offensive coordinator Danny Freund, and that was his offense that he was trying to implement. Then suddenly Rodgers leaves before the bowl game and they go for 600 yards and the offense doesn't look anything like we've seen all year. And it's okay. This maybe is a little more head coach oriented than OC oriented. And I think you'll see that this year with Freund, the OC at North Dakota, and you'll see what Rodgers' offense looks like at Iowa State. And I think it was a byproduct more than anything of just a defensive head coach that didn't have was maybe hadn't modernized to the game of offensive football. And I think that, you got away with that at South Dakota State when you had, the best players and the best athletes on the field. But the idea of just running the ball, 30 times on inside zone, it doesn't work unless you've got the best offensive linemen and the best running backs, and they can outmatch the defensive lines you're facing. not as easy to do when you've got Ole Miss and Washington and James Madison and Virginia in there. So I think just by the byproduct of Kirby Moore being the head coach, Matt Miller being the offensive coordinator, I think you're just going to see a naturally better offense. I think those guys have a much better feel for what offensive football should look like nowadays compared to Rodgers. I think what we saw even in spring was a more dynamic, spread offense instead of, again, a very, three tight end, two running back, pound the ball up the middle 40 times and hope it works. I think the offense will be much improved. The defense on the other side will be maybe more of the question because that was Rodgers' kind of natural knowledge. And the defense was extremely good last year. It was, the best defense we've seen at Wazoo in a long, long time under the direction of Rodgers and DC Jesse Bobbitt. So I think Trent Bray, the new DC, the former Oregon State head coach in DC, knows his stuff. I think he's had some very good defenses at Oregon State. But when you look at especially everything they lost on defense, both in terms of graduations and guys that Rodgers took with him versus maybe what you lost on offense, which you kept a lot of your top guys, especially at the skill positions. I think the offense is going to be a little bit more advanced, or at least on paper looks a little bit more advanced, whereas the defense is going to be kind of, melding together a lot of new pieces and parts. And again, these guys played spring ball together. They've been together now a few months, but I think it'll be maybe a bit more of a shift kind of to what fans have expected out of Washington State in the past, which is the high-powered offensive games.
I know we don't really learn anything from spring because, you just really don't anymore. But are there any takeaways from the spring program that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think what really stood out is the defensive line. I think that was the one position where they really got hit hard. Basically, I mean, they entered, portal season with 2 defensive tackles on the roster and ended up, I think it was 7 or 8. Their edge rushers, they lost most of their sacks from last year. And I think coming away from spring, you felt like these guys, they might be a better group than it was last year. I mean, I think you look at Linus Zunk, you get a guy who had played at Vanderbilt, maybe wasn't a starter, but was playing serious snaps at Vanderbilt at a really good SEC school. Matthias McLean was a superstar at Idaho and was pretty highly sought after by numerous Big 12 schools. Then you kind of get into some of the depth there, guys like Ben Beatty, who stayed with the program, Mikey Hughes. You got Ed Okundeyi from Arizona, who has a little bit of, experience being in the Big 12. And then you look at the interior, and again, you've got Paul Hudson, who was a playmaker at Marshall. You've got a couple of really big bodies, DeMarge Lewis from SMU, who's been around the college game a while. Jaira Leo Pepitele from Eastern Washington, same thing. You get a kind of a speed leverage guy in Caden Beatty back. He was here last year. Balam Miller, another big body from St. Francis. Ike Okafor, another big body from Cal. And you kind of look at what you've put together there, and it's, you have some confidence in what that defensive line is going to be able to do. And then I think you just notice the continuity up front. You notice the continuity on the offensive line where Wazoo graduated 3 starters, AJ Vaipulu, Christian Hilborn, Brock Dew. But 4 of the 5 guys that they right now would project to run out as the starters are in multiple years now at Wazoo, with Ashton Tripp at left tackle, Johnny Lester at left guard, Kyle Martin at center, Noah Dunham at right guard, the one new guy being Maximus McCree at right tackle. All 5 of those guys have started games. McCree started games at Washington in the last couple of years. The other 4 have started games at Wazoo. Tripp and Lester were full-time starters last year. Martin and Dunham made some spot starts when there were injuries, but you just saw a group that looked like they were familiar playing with one another. And I think that is going to help, especially after it was such a revolving door on the offensive line last year with a lot of new faces, a handful of injuries. And when you look at when Washington State maybe especially had offensive struggles, I mean, I think the Oregon State game was kind of the pinnacle of that. They're running out Kyle Martin at that point in his first career appearance. Trevor Bindell, who's now at Iowa State, it was his first career appearance. You had Johnny Lester playing out of position. I think they're deeper there, and I think there's a lot more continuity, and I don't think it's going to take nearly as long for those guys to kind of mesh together once the season starts.
Who's going to be the quarter? They never put starter?
No. No, so
they haven't named a starter yet.
No, they have not.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. So
who out of that group do you think will come out as a starter?
Yeah, I think we were expecting out of spring it would pretty clearly be Caden Pinnick, the UC Davis transfer, Big Sky Freshman of the Year. It didn't, by the time spring was done, it wasn't at that stage yet. And I think it was a little bit closer, and I think you you were kind of waiting for Pinnock to really separate himself in the spring, and he didn't really do that. And it wasn't that any of the quarterbacks played poorly. It was just like, okay, they're all kind of on equal footing to some degree. The coach's staff's always going to say, oh, it's a battle. But, the years when it was Cam Ward at quarterback, they would say, Jake Dicker would say it's a battle. Everyone knew who QB1 was. I think even 2 years ago when it was Mateer versus Zevi Eckhouse, you felt pretty confident it would be Mateer. Granted, last year, everyone felt confident it was going to be Zevi Eckhouse, and it ends up being Jackson Potter to start the season. But I still would be pretty surprised if it wasn't Caden Pinnock. I mean, unless fall camp shows us something completely different than what we were seeing in the spring. And, and Julian Duggar and Owen Eshelman have talent. There was no shortage of talent in that room. But I do think Pinnock, just in terms of his experience as a starting quarterback and maybe what his upside still brings as a guy who's, still got 3 years of eligibility, I think he's probably the guy who will emerge as QB1.
Because when I had to take a look at the quarterback competition, a lot of youth. I mean, they're young.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really young.
Right, and they only have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. I mean, they didn't end up signing a quarterback in the prep class, so it's just Duggar, Eshelman, and Pinnock. They got a couple walk-ons in there, but it's basically a 3-man race, and all 3 of those guys are competing for the starting job, and it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. There's not a wild card or anything really in that scenario.
So let me jump to the 2026 schedule. I really don't like doing this like this early. It's only July. Big Ten's getting done with their media days. Blah 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 blah. Why in the hell are they playing the Apple Cup the very first week? I don't know. Jamie, this game should be at the back end. I'm sorry. Rivalry weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. Look, has it lost maybe some of its luster? Maybe not to the people in Washington. It hasn't. It's still the Apple Cup. Why have they stuck this game at the beginning of the year, do you think?
I think it's just how each schedule worked out, where you had games X, Y, and Z already scheduled, and this one you felt like you could move around a little bit. I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. I understand that it can't be played on the last weekend before Thanksgiving anymore. It's not a conference game. I know there are teams who obviously do play out those out-of-conference games. Georgia Tech, for example. Texas and A&M did for a while before Texas joined the SEC. But I do think that there would be an argument against a Big Ten team playing a non-Power 4 school that last week of the season. So I do get that. But I think even last year, you at least had a couple games in. There was at least a little bit of build. I think you go into this game and, Washington State fans don't know really what to expect. It's a new coach. Washington obviously lost a lot from last year. They had the whole drama with Damon Williams. So they're not sure what it's all going to look like on the field in that regard. You take out the maybe a lot of the meaning of that game. I mean, for years, there was 3 straight years those 2 teams met in the Apple Cup, and had Washington State won, they would have gone to the Pac-12 title game. Washington won all 3, and 2 of those years they went to the title game. But you had meaningful games year after year after year after year, and now it's like, okay, if Washington wins, it's good for them. If Washington State wins, bragging rights obviously are still important. But, I think if anything, it helps Washington State more, because if, you get to the end of the season and they're trying to push their way into the group of 6 playoff spot, and they have won the Apple Cup, that's a game that they can point to as a huge resume builder.
Yeah.
But, I think for the fan standpoint, again, the meaning and the importance behind it isn't the same. And then you take all of that and you put the game on a Sunday. So it's not even on a college football Saturday. They're playing on Sunday on NBC, 1 o'clock. And it's just, and I think for Washington State, there's understandable frustration, because that gives them a 6-day week before they go to Manhattan, Kansas. And I think I don't totally understand how that was approved, where, again, it's one thing for Washington. They sit at home and they play next week at Utah State. Yeah, it's a one less day, but they're still at home. Washington State's got to come back to Seattle or come back to Pullman that Sunday night and probably leave for Manhattan 3 days later. You take a day out of the travel. So it's just, I think it honestly, if anything, the fact that it's on a Sunday just illustrates what the game has become. And it's more of an exhibition than anything, than an actual truly meaningful rivalry game.
Right. And you said they're at Kansas State Saturday, September 12th. I mean, I mean, Washington and Kansas State are both going to be favored in those games. Then they're home against Duquesne. That should be a W. Then they're home against Arizona. I don't know what I'm getting from Arizona. That's a toss-up for me. Then they're home against Fresno State. Again, Fresno State, one of those programs. It's always dicey. It's always tricky. That's a toss-up. At Utah State, beat them in the bowl game last year. That's winnable. At Oregon State, again, cross the border. Again, they split last year, so it'll be tough. Boise State always wants to spread their peacock wings, but they get them at home. At San Diego State, which is always tough to play at. Then they get the bye. They're home against Colorado State, who just seems to be rebuilding all the time. Then they're at Texas State, who, and then at Oregon State, and then the Pac-12 championship. So as I look at this schedule here, I'm circling. Obviously, I'm circling Oregon State because they play twice. I'm circling Boise, and I'm circling San Diego State. I think those three particular games could make or break their season.
Yeah, and I think a couple of the good things is they get Boise State at home. That helps. They get Fresno State at home. That helps. They've, the one thing, no matter all the turnover, Washington State has defended their home field pretty darn well over the last few years. The Apple Cup notwithstanding last year, and the wild game against Wyoming 2 years ago when Ben Arbuckle was basically already on his flight to Norman, and I don't think Mateer was far behind, and Dickert's head was in Winston-Salem and all that. Other than that, they have been a tough team to beat at home. I think Wisconsin and Texas Tech have certainly seen that, and there's other good teams. Even some of the the teams last year. It's not as if Toledo and Louisiana Tech or Alabama and Georgia, but they're solid group of 5 teams, and I mean they were both beaten pretty darn soundly in Pullman. So I think Washington State has to like its chances in all their home games. I think Arizona is a tough game. It's obviously about as experienced of a quarterback as you can get with Noah Fafita.
Yeah.
It's also a game that I think Washington State probably looks at and say this might be the chance to steal one of those games, steal one of those Power 3 or Power 4 games, those 3 games, and get a team at home. Now, granted, Fafita has been to Pullman. He's put up 44 points in Pullman, did that 3 years ago, but obviously different coach, different. I mean, nothing's the same on either side of the sideline. So I do think that is a game that they maybe, again, if you're talking about in December, trying to get to that group of 5, group of 6 CFP spot, that's the type of game that's a resume builder. But, I think at the same time, as you said, there's some challenging road games. San Diego State will not be an easy one. They did win down there a couple years ago, but that was a much different Aztecs team and a much different Washington State team. That'll not be an easy game to play. In theory, on paper, Oregon State on the road, it should be an extremely winnable game. The home team, the road team hasn't won that game since 2018, excluding the COVID year in 2020 when there are no fans. I mean, Washington State had teams miles better than Oregon State in 2024 and in 2025, and they lost both of those games in about as different a games as you could imagine. One game there was no defense. One game there was no offense. So that, Reser Stadium has really just kind of been a house of horrors for Washington State the last few years. The same way that Martin Stadium and Giesa Field has been a house of horrors for Oregon State. They haven't won there since I think 2000. It's either 12 or 14. It's been a while. I know that much.
Mm-hmm.
It is I think 13 actually, but it's been a long time since the Bees have gone to Pullman and won. So I think for Washington State, it's going to be, can you solve the crucible that seems to be Reser Stadium and get, what would be a pretty key win? And can you defend your home turf and then go and maybe get one of those other games, whether that's at San Diego State, whether that's one of the 3 Power 4 games, whether that's, going in and, taking care of business in some of the road games, Utah State. I think Texas State's a sneaky game that late to Thanksgiving. They don't usually play well that week. Again, traditionally, Washington State has struggled in that game on the road. So I do think there's a lot of interesting storylines. I think there's a lot of winnable games. I mean, I don't think there's a game that you look at and say they have absolutely no shot in. I think, as opposed to last year, we were pretty confident they weren't going into Oxford and winning. Granted, they were right in that all the way, but it obviously will be tough to beat Washington. It'll be tough to beat Kansas State on the road, but I don't think anyone's looking at those games saying, no, Washington State has zero chance. It would take, some things going right. It would take an upset, but I don't think there's a game on this schedule that is just pencil it in for a loss. Whereas I think you probably can pencil in a win over Duquesne at home. I would hope so, but I've also seen Washington State lose to Portland State and lose to Eastern Washington and barely beat Idaho last year. And barely beat Idaho 4 years ago. So it's college football and you just never know.
Before I let you go, I'm not going to have you make any predictions because I'm having my third annual college football preview special. I'll have you back on there and we'll talk about Washington State, what you think their record will be, and then we'll talk about, look, the Pac-12 obviously is revamping, but I've got to get your take on something. When you see the Stanford players, putting together collective bargaining, arbitration, stuff like that, trying to get everything unionized. Look, you're up there. Well, it used to be Pac-12, Pac-14 territory, and you're in the thick of it. What the hell is going on, man? I mean, it just, once they open Pandora's box, it just never seems to stop. First, it was Oregon and whoever going to the Big Ten. Then it was Oklahoma and Texas going into the SEC. Then NIL is approved. And it just seems like there's this, and then now Greg Sankey says, well, it's probably never going to happen. I was just sort of like floating that out there, that we would break away from the NCAA. I don't trust anything that comes out of any administrator's mouths at all now in the landscape. I don't even call it college athletics anymore, Jamie. It is semi-pro sports at the collegiate level, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I've used this example before, is the greatest thing that I can use to illustrate what college football is now is when Cam Ward transferred from Incarnate Word to Washington State. Washington State paid him, I think it was about $50,000 in NIL deals, and he got a truck to do some advertising. $50,000 in a truck gets you laughed out of the room by a punter nowadays, let alone get a premium quarterback. I mean, what was I think the tweet that came out a few days ago where how many players are making more in college basketball than LeBron James is going to make this year with the Sixers? And, you just keep hearing the numbers and hearing the numbers and hearing the numbers. And, the Washington State basketball team that went 12-20, and you've got role players getting offered $600,000-$700,000. And frankly, guys who just weren't very good and are getting this kind of money. And, backups on the Wazoo women's basketball team who went 9-25 are getting $75,000 to $100,000. And where meanwhile, they're keeping their starters for cheaper. And, you hear just some of the dollar signs that get thrown around. And I'll say to Washington State, especially the football team's credit, they found, I think, some avenues to get some of that money, because I mean, some of the guys they kept this last offseason would have been gone 2 years ago. I mean, when you look at Tony Freeman and Kirby Voorhees, especially, I think hiring a Kirby Moore and, the proximity and the fact that he's a known name, especially in the central Washington area, I think helped Washington State be a lot more competitive in the NIL field. But, for the longest time, and we'll see what it looks like again this winter for the Washington State program, transfer portal season was just, okay, who's going, and you would see a freshman really start to pop off, and 4 games in, it's okay. Ace Glass was a star at Washington State on the hardwood this year, and he had a 40-burger against Arizona State in Maui. And at that moment, everyone knew, all right, he's playing somewhere else next year. Like, there was no debate. There was no maybe Wayshawn Parker, who's at Utah now, had a couple of huge games as a freshman, and it was, yep, all right, he's playing somewhere else next year. So it's just, it's just messy in that. And, you start listing guys, and it's, where didn't they play? And, it's more surprising when you see a kid stay for 5 years or 4 years. And heck, it's more surprising when you see a kid who's played 2 places. It's 3 or 4 regularly. And it's just, so I'm with you. I don't trust anything any administrator says. They're going to say what they want publicly, but it's a different game behind the scenes, and it's just become a mess.
Yeah, it's a shame. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Jamie Vinnick at Jamie Vinnick 9 on the Twitter, award-winning Palouse bureau chief for the at Coug Fan com. Is it com or just is it's at Coug Fan com?
CougFan.com on Twitter, CougFan.com on the URL.
Okay. At WSU Pullman alum, Viva the Underdogs, it says on here. So, Jamie, thanks for coming on. At the end of August, I'll pick your brain again.
Sounds good. Yep, appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks, good. Thanks, man. Jamie Vinnick, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, Washington State. I'm not going to make any predictions. The first 2 road games, they'll be heavy underdogs. Maybe not to Kansas State. I don't know about Kansas State, but they will be to Washington. Then they have 3 straight home games. They should beat Duquesne. Arizona is winnable at home. And Fresno State's winnable at home. So if they lose the first 2, but they can win those next 3 at home, you're going to be 3-2 going to Utah State, which you beat handily in the bowl game last year. So I wouldn't see why they wouldn't be able to go into Maverick Stadium there in Logan and be 4-2. Then they're at Oregon State, which is a toss-up for me. Home against Boise State, which is kind of tough. Well, I don't know what Boise State's going to be like this year. At San Diego State, but it's always a tough place to play, but that's winnable. Then again, the bye week, home against Colorado State in Pullman. I more than likely should win that one. At Texas State, he said that's a sneaky, tricky one. That's actually the Saturday before Thanksgiving. I wouldn't see why they couldn't win that one. And then home against Oregon State, then the Pac-12 championship game if they make it. You know, if I had to look at it now, I'm looking at maybe 8-5-ish, 8-4-ish. 7-5, somewhere in there. And again, there's other teams coming into the pack, whatever it is, next year. And I'm glad for the conferences. You know, when Oregon left and USC left, and UCLA left, Arizona, when they all left, they thought that that conference was done. And now the likes of Washington State and Oregon State, or the 2 left, they're looking at everybody going like this. So good for them. I'm going to end it there. Again, thanks for Jamie Vinnick for coming on. Well, before I forget, because I tend to, I got to do this. Where's my script? Because I don't want to mess it up. Where am I going? And then just give me a second. Bear with me. Talk amongst yourselves. Let me take my ugly ass off here. Let me go over to my little board over here. Behind the scenes. Let me take my ugly ass off. So I'm going to end it there. Tell you what, I'll see everybody in about a minute or two as I switch over. Early Evening Sports Buffet with Ginch here on the Red Line Radio Network. Let's play a little Washington State music. The fight song. See you in a couple minutes.
Oh, Redline Network introduces our newest partnership, Outlaw Light. Outlaw is crafted for all of the beer drinking patrons of America. They aren't preaching or teaching, their mission plain and simple, to provide a high quality beer at an affordable price. Outlaw is crisp, crushable, refreshing. Available by the case, tall boys, 16-ounce 6-packs or singles. Go to outlawbeer.com to find the nearest can or tavern near you. The Redline Network proudly raises their cans to you. Stay bold, Outlaw.